To get started, just as we usually do, finding a comfortable position, doing a little body scan, checking our posture. And I've always found that the like the legs or the lower half of the body is kind of like the foundation, and if I don't get my foundation in a comfortable, stable position, then everything else kind of doesn't come together. So taking a little time just to find this foundation that's suitable for today, because tomorrow it's going to be something different probably. Find this foundation, and we can just build upon that, checking our back, making sure it's straight, all the way up to the shoulders, through the neck, through the crown of our heads. It's kind of almost a straight line. We relax our skull, our facial muscles, our eyes, our jaw. Release any tension in the neck or the arms. And then we can just observe the weight of this body sitting here in the session. Become mindful of our breath. And you can just notice where you can feel the breath, whether it's at the tip of the nose, more in your stomach, in your ribs, your torso. And just bringing your attention to the inhale and the exhale. And then we think about our motivation. And maybe it's different for everyone. And maybe we think that it's the beginning of the year. So maybe our motivation is to have a good year, to have an auspicious year, to meditate once a week, once a day, to become a better person. So, whatever it is, think about your motivation and bring it to your heart. Don't have it sit out there as something extra, but really bring it right inside. Let's say, this is my motivation. So now the next few weeks, probably more like a month, we're going to be meditating on the topic of death. So we spent the last 4 or 5 weeks contemplating the precious human rebirth, the rarity of this rebirth, how special it is, unique it is to allow us to practice. And now, when we build upon that, we we think about death, because this is one of the obstacles or main obstacles that we try to overcome on the path. And it's an obstacle because it's really closely related to the eight worldly dharmas, or the eight worldly concerns. And it's related to the elements of our mind. Um, it's not physical. So this obstacle of death is not something we can cut out like you would do during a surgery. So the best thing we can actually do to work on this obstacle of death is to meditate on it. And when we think about these eight worldly concerns, and we think about, what are they, So getting pleasant things in life. So the pleasures of uh, things like good food, praise, gaining uh, material things, and good reputation. So it's this attraction to get all of those things and then to avoid their opposites. And whenever our mind is contaminated by any of these concerns, then whatever we're doing, whatever action we're doing, is a worldly practice. So even if we're doing a Dharma practice, such as reciting prayers, but we're doing it for good reputation, then it's for a worldly activity. So it's really, really tricky and nuanced to watch our mind when we're doing these things. And so the Buddha taught the importance of um, meditating on impermanence and morality, right? And one of the Buddha's last teachings, or maybe last words, the Buddha stated everything, whether it's stationary or movable, is bound to perish in the end. And the Buddha also taught that death and impermanence are important during the entire path to enlightenment. So being mindful of impermanence and death at the beginning, where we are now, is to um, help propel one to engage in the practice. And when we're in the middle of the path, it's to maintain our energy. And when we're nearing the end of the path, it's there to induce one to complete the practice. So it's not a beginner practice, and it's not an advanced practice. It's a practice for all levels of the stage. And the meditating on death mm, is valuable and productive as long as you're not in a state of nervousness and there's no nervous tension. If that's the case, then it's better that one relaxes and contemplates more pleasant aspects of the Dharma, and then to meditate on death and impermanence once the nervous tension has been uh, released or resolved. So we can shortly recall the precious human rebirth, so this opportunity and this fortunate basis that we have right now, and how very rare and valuable it is. And now we're to contemplate how fragile and short-lived it is. So in the texts, the human body is compared to a drop of dew on the morning grass, which lasts only for a short time. Either the wind comes by and blows it off the blade of grass, or the sun rises and dries it up. So is this life and this body. And this is the case for all of samsara. So all bodies in samsara. So whether it's a human or an animal, a hell being, a preta, or a god, they'll all be succumb to impermanence and will quickly pass. So there's no escape of impermanence and death within any of the samsaric realms. So we can think about it, right? Wherever we go, death is inevitable, right? So we're on this earth. We could go to another country. We could get on a boat, take an airplane, a flight. We could travel all the way to the sea of the floor of the sea. Travel to the moon, maybe someday to further planets, or maybe we could hide away in a cave in the mountains. So we can go to all of these places, and there's no way to avoid impermanence, to avoid death. And there's also uh, no time in which we can avoid death. So what does that mean? So in the past, there were beings who had lived even very, very long ago. Think about them 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. And of those people, not one of them has escaped death. And just as in those times, we can't find anyone today that's going to escape death. And just as well in the future, no one will be able to escape death. So not even the strongest beings in samsara can escape death. So if we think about those images of strength, like the Superman figures in our lives, or famous people that we know of, or maybe presidents of countries. Movie stars. So none of these powerful people, these strong people, none of them have the power to overcome death. And they don't have any more power to overcome death than does a tiny, small insect. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't uh, we can't bribe our way out of it. There's no special diet that will help us avoid death. And we spend a lot of time thinking about eating healthy foods. And even if we create the greatest military on the earth and try to fight death, even this great military will not be able to stop death. And if we think about when we're sick and we receive treatment from a doctor, and they help us recover. But when it's time for us to die, all the doctors in the entire universe cannot save us. So the certainty of death is quite real and present. So by making these contemplations and meditating on the true uh, impermanent nature of this body is very grounding. And it helps us to invest more in our mind, to develop our minds. Because our minds are kind of like empty bank accounts that can be filled with auspicious teachings. And those can be beneficial after the time of death. So we can dedicate all the merit that we created during this meditation, especially to all the beings that have recently passed away, that have experienced the impermanence of the body and death. And we can dedicate that they transition through the bardo and find a precious human rebirth, or even a rebirth into a pure realm as quickly as possible. And we can also dedicate for anyone that is sick, that they do recover and not experience too much suffering. And we can dedicate that our contemplations on death and impermanence, that they become more present and more real in our practice. And not that we avoid them, but we confront them and bring them into our daily contemplations. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.